There have been calls by some for the public to contact me and my office in an attempt to influence my decision-making in this case. This has been extraordinarily disruptive for court staff. It's also highly inappropriate. Court is not supposed to, and this court will never, take into account public sentiment regarding its judicial decisions. I ask that you not continue to mount such campaigns. The elected prosecutor is the sole authority in deciding what charges to pursue, as well as what penalties to ask for. This court cannot require the prosecutor to seek the death penalty, nor would it be appropriate for this court to attempt to do that. I have not read any of the numerous messages, nor listened to any of the numerous voicemails. Those have all been forwarded to security and, where appropriate, to law enforcement.
July 2025, a date that is now written forever in the history of true crime in America.
Well, I will say, we have no intention of calling all the family members. We have the intention of calling a few of the family members who serve certain purposes. I can't think of a reason that we couldn't. Obviously, it's not ideal. It's completely out of context. It's out of order.
This is like a gumbo. You are going to put all the pieces that go into the pot. And at the end of the day, the jury's going to decide whether it's a good soup or not from the state's perspective. And so I think we get too obsessively stuck on the idea of exactly the order these things need to come in, right? And so I'm not sure why you couldn't call the family members you need up front, and then we take away this concern. I can certainly understand from the defense perspective the need and desire to have the defendant's support family here in the courtroom.
Bryan Kohberger, a name people knew only as a suspect, said himself in court today, guilty. Kohberger stood in the courtroom wearing a suit, absolutely calm. There was no guilt, no regret on his face. Judge Stephen Hippler questioned him separately on each charge, and Kohberger, without any hesitation, said every time, guilty. When he made this confession, there was a dead silence in the courtroom. There were tears in the eyes of the victim families, but that was not relief. That was an absolute justice, in which there was no answer. The court made it clear, this guilty plea is a legal agreement. In exchange for the death penalty, Kohberger will get life imprisonment without parole, 4 different life sentences, plus 10 years for burglary. What does that mean? He will never come out again. No appeal, no parole, no mercy. But the biggest impact of this plea was that there would be no trial now. And when there was no trial, there would be no cross-examination. Whatever motive the killer had in his mind, it will never come out in front of the court. So yes, Bryan Kohberger said guilty, but he never told why. And perhaps this why is the biggest pain in this case. Why did Bryan Kohberger take a guilty plea? Was it a strategy or pressure? Was it a strategy or was he cornered? When Bryan Kohberger pleaded guilt, the biggest question that arises is why? Did he really admit his crime? Or was it just a calculated move, a game plan? If we look at the timeline of the entire case, Kohberger and his lawyers tried to delay the trial from the very beginning. First, a motion was filed that media coverage was creating bias. Then it was said that Kohberger has autism spectrum disorder, so he is not eligible for the death penalty. At one point, they even argued that the DNA evidence was collected illegally. But Judge Stephen Hippler rejected all these arguments. The court clearly said, the evidence is strong, the trial will take place on time, and the death penalty is also on the table. And this was that moment when the defense team realized that now nothing was left. The evidence against Kohberger was not just circumstantial, it was direct. The sheath of a combat knife several times on which Kohberger's DNA was found. Phone records, which were tracking his movements multiple times around the crime scene. his white Hyundai Elantra, which was recorded in surveillance on the night of the crime. Despite being a criminal justice student, Kohberger could not escape this trap. So when he realized that going to trial would mean a death sentence, then he cut the deal. He received immunity from the death penalty in exchange for a guilty plea, but his condition was no appeals, no parole, life imprisonment till death. Legal experts say it was a tactical surrender. A surrender in which a person saves himself from total annihilation, but does not accept anything emotionally. And the scariest part? Despite saying guilty in the courtroom, there was no emotion on Bryan Kohberger's face, no remorse, no guilt, no grief. So was it really a surrender, or was it just a cold, calculated move so that he remained alive and the control remained in his hands? No one has an answer, but this much is certain. This guilty plea is a shortcut to justice, but it can also be the graveyard of truth. Reaction of victim families, closure or anger. The first thing that made headlines outside the courtroom after Bryan Kohberger's guilty plea was the reaction of the victim families. 4 families, 4 children, 4 different emotions. Ethan Chapin's family hid their pain and said, "We're grateful this is over. We don't have to hear the details. We can begin to heal." Madison Mogan and Zana Knodl's loved ones also called the plea a peaceful closure. But it was not that simple. Kaylee Goncalves' family, especially her father, Steve Goncalves, were furious as they left the courtroom. He said, "The killer got mercy, but he did not give even a moment to my daughter." Kaylee's sister Aubrey wrote an emotional open letter in which she said, "The system gave us silence, not justice." That letter went viral. She wrote that this plea deal is another trauma for them, because they will never know the motive. And when Steve Goncalves publicly announced that he is returning the $85,000 trial support fund that he had raised from the people, then the whole America was shocked for once. His message was clear. If the trial doesn't happen, then what should I do with that money? I wanted answers, not punishment. This guilty plea was peace for some families, and for some, there was another knife, this time in his heart. What was lost due to cancellation of trial? Something else was quietly killed along with Bryan Kohberger's guilty confession, the trial. Yes, now the evidence will not be shown to the jurors in any courtroom. There will be no witness cross-examined. There will be no forensic reconstruction. No one will be asked why. And in this silence, the truth has been sacrificed the most. Legal experts know the trial is not just a means of punishment. It is a public record, a space where every angle, every motive, every doubt is openly discussed. In this case, Kohberger's motive has not been officially disclosed yet. Did the victims already know? Was it jealous, obsession, revenge, or a cold-blooded psychological thrill? Now we will never know. When the trial happened, the FBI, forensic experts, and digital analysts would all present their data in the courtroom. Then we might have known that Kohberger had made a plan beforehand, how he would target which victim, how he would avoid CCTV coverage, and what his behavior was after the crime. But now, after the guilty plea, all this will be sealed. The files will be closed, and a story that the world should understand will remain hidden. This isn't just a legal closure, it's a narrative collapse. The evidence that shattered Kohberger? You must be wondering, why did an intelligent PhD student like Kohberger take a guilty plea? What was there against him that forced him? Let's see. What was the hardcore forensic proof? The first biggest proof was a single-bar combat knife sheath found at the crime scene. Kohberger's DNA was on it. Clean match, no doubt. Dusra proof. Cell tower data. Kohberger's mobile was activated near the crime scene 12 times before the crime, especially around 3 o'clock in the night. Tisra, Hyundai Elantra. His car was seen multiple times in the crime night surveillance footage. Speed change, return patterns, everything was with the FBI. Fourth, trash DNA match. The FBI took DNA from his father's trash and matched it. Pure genetic confirmation. First, his online behavior. He was a criminology student. He did research on patterns of serial killers. He posted anonymous questions on Reddit. How did you feel after killing someone? Type. Everything together. The case that was made against Kohberger was airtight. He had no alibi, no explanation. That's why legal experts say this guilty plea was not regret. It was survival instinct, a deal to stay alive in jail. But the irony is this. A person like Kohberger considered the system to be a game, and when he lost the game, he took a shortcut and put the truth in the grave. Courtroom conversation between the judge and Kohberger. The 2nd of July 2025. There was a deep silence in courtroom number 3 in Latah County, Idaho. Judge Stephen Hippler sat on his bench. His face was serious, but clear. Every eye in the courtroom was fixed on Bryan Kohberger, a PhD criminology student, now a confessed killer. The judge looked straight at him and began reading out charges one by one. Mr. Kohberger, you are charged with the murder of Kaylee Goncalves. How do you plead? Kohberger took a small glance toward his defense attorney, then looked at the judge and gave a straight answer. Guilty, Your Honor. Then the judge asked, you are also charged with the murder of Madison Mogan. How do you plead? Kohberger repeated the same thing again. Guilty. While doing this, the judge read out the names of the 4 murder victims, Ethan Chapin, Zana Knodler, and Kohberger gave the same answer each time without any expression. Guilty. Judge Hippler said another important line after that. Are you entering this plea voluntarily, Mr. Kohberger? Has anyone threatened you or promised you anything in exchange for this plea? Kohberger immediately said, no, Your Honor, I'm doing this voluntarily. Then the judge asked, do you understand that by pleading guilty, you waive your right to a trial by jury? Bryan calmly replied, yes, Your Honor. There was a pin-drop silence in the courtroom. Neither the press broke its silence, nor the families spoke out. Everybody heard it. Every word, every sentence. Judge finally declared, the court accepts your plea of guilty. You will be sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences without parole, plus 10 years for burglary. No appeals will be permitted. This case is now closed. And then, in that moment, Kohberger's entire case was turned. There will be no public trial, no questioning, no cross-examination. Just a cold courtroom confession. Lifetime imprisonment. But during that entire hearing, Kohberger did not show any remorse even once. No tears in his eyes, no fear in his voice, just short, robotic answers, as if he was solving MQs of some exam. This moment was not just a legal procedure. It was a living proof of the terrifying silence hidden inside a human being. Bryan Kohberger pleaded guilty, but there was no explanation for his guilty plea. There was no apology. There was no reason. Most important part of their story, why, was never revealed. The families put up the facade of closure, but their truth is this. Justice was done, but the truth was buried alive. This guilty plea cancelled America's biggest trial. The mic of truth was never turned on. And Kohberger? He will now spend his life in prison with his cold silence. No remorse, no answers, nor humanity. So the question is not whether Bryan Kohberger confessed. The question is, did he ever think about what he did? And if the answer is no, then perhaps this case will remain unfinished forever. Justice delivered, truth denied, silence forever. I hope to meet all of you with the same true crime and thriller crime case in the next video, and if you found this video informative but liked it even a little bit, then do subscribe to my channel and definitely select the notification bell on all